There we go. Yeah, uh, probably the biggest theme that we covered last week was the chaos waters. We actually didn't even start the actual book of Jonah itself last week. And this is kind of Jonah and more. So we're gonna take like a bunch of detours, and because there's a bunch of connections, and kind of like what this is, a little bit of an exploration into um, the way that Jonah intersects with other books in terms of uh, the um, the narrative, the narrative that's being formed, the themes that are being kind of put forward. And a lot of times, I think we've kind of like lost that art, or we lost it for a long time, of being able to look at it, look at the books as not just things that happened in history and events and that they're recorded, and that but also that there's all these design patterns that you have this idea of the chaos waters that go all the way back to Genesis, and how God formed the land from out of it. But uh, chaos is kind of, you could say, is like there's a potential in it. But by the end of the Bible, it says that there'd be no more sea. And a lot of people don't know what that's about. But if you've kind of tracked it throughout the Bible, that the large waters are kind of like the realms of chaos. Of course, you have that in the Noah story, and really it's creation kind of partially collapsing into itself, because you have the waters above and the waters below that are kind of being recombined, and it's an image of sort of a new creation that comes out of it at the end of the Jonah story, where again he's on dry land, kind of, which paints him as sort of like a new Adam. And we talked about how that goes all the way into, the story of how Jesus, when he's being baptized, in the waters, it's a foretaste of the idea that he's going to die but also be resurrected. And for us, baptism is the identification of us going through the chaos waters of death, but also being resurrected into new life on the other side of it. So for the story in Moses at the parting of the Red Sea, they are also kind of going through their Noah event, where they're being saved through the chaotic waters, but then kind of come into a land of promise. You see them coming into the promised land through the Jordan, which is a symbol of that. And of course, all those things tied together with Christ being baptized in the Jordan. So there's a lot of layers in all of these things. So we're going to kind of continue. Not we're going to leave the chaos water thing behind. We'll probably mention it here and there. I'm not going to get into like Leviathan, the dragon, and stuff like that today. No, but that's going to be probably next week. Because that has more to do with Jonah's prayer. There's a couple of places where we're going to go today that you may not have expected. For instance, Jonah is a little bit of the anti-Noah, or there's a juxtaposition between Noah and they're both called by God, and they're both saved through the waters. I guess you could say the fish that swallows Jonah is sort of his ark in a sense. Um, but the way that Noah gets into the boat to escape the storm that God is sending, on the other hand, you get Jonah, who gets on the boat and God sends the storm. So the storm is on account of Jonah, and as uh, as opposed to, you know, Noah is being saved deliberately from the storm, but God is sending the storm on everybody else. So this time the storm is because of Jonah, and you get some of the same sort of language. You have the the language in uh, at the end of the Noah story. It says the ruach, which is a wind. Ruach, by the way, is the same word as spirit. Uh, it's the same thing in Greek, where you have the same word for spirit is the same word for wind or breath. So in Greek, it's pneuma. It's where you get the term pneumatology from, which is the study of the Holy Spirit. But it's also the same word where you get pneumatic from, or like in pneumonia, things that are air related. Um, the that's kind of the way you can think of ruach is a wind from God, or his spirit. His spirit was over the waters in Genesis 1. His a wind blows and dries up the waters in the Noah story. This time you're going to see a wind blowing that comes with the storm, and you also see that in the same kind of idea when Jesus stills the storm. Oh, by the way, if you have your audio on, please mute yourself. Anyway, so second of all, Noah, he's from the Sethite line, so he's kind of one of the chosen people. I say chosen because there is a chosen line that God always has had to bring the seed of the woman, right? To oppose the seed of the serpent. So some from the Sethite line, you have uh, Noah as one of the chosen people, and he escapes the judgment on the seed of Cain. So the seed of Cain are those are the ones that are kind of focused on as being the 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 evil generation that God destroys in the flood. Jonah is, on the other hand, he's from the chosen line. He's a Semite, right, or a Shemite. Um, but he is sent to the lost to save them from judgment. So whereas Noah was just straight up just saved from the judgment and the storm, he's being basically sent to warn Nineveh. And when he goes the opposite direction, God sends the storm after him. So the evil generation and the people from Noah's day are assigned through the watery abyss. But Jonah is the one who's sent to the watery abyss in this case. But this time he's going through the waters and the abyss in order to save an evil generation of Gentiles. So the script is kind of flipped in a number of ways. The script is really flipped with the idea of Israel and a chosen people. So you have what's happened in the Noah story that always ends up being reflected later, like in the Moses stories, Moses and Joshua. But you're also getting the idea that God is choosing a people, but he's choosing them for a purpose, and that purpose is to save others from out of the abyss. So there's multiple layers there. So Jonah can be seen as sort of an anti-Noah figure. Jonah, the son of Amittai. Actually, the name Jonah means dove, which is interesting. And Amittai means son of faithfulness, which he's absolutely not. He's absolutely not faithful. It's almost like it's a comedy name. Dove, son of faithfulness, and looking at the character of Job, it doesn't really seem like he's very faithful at all. But that's what it means. There is an idea in Midrash, which is kind of it's the rabbinic tradition after Jesus's time that's developed in Judaism, non-Christian Judaism, where Jonah, and I don't know if this traces back to before Midrash. I just think it's interesting, but they place him as the son that his mother was Zarephath. In other words, she's the widow that houses Elijah. Yeah. So if you remember that story, he goes and he stops the rain, and then God sends him to find this widow who's supposed to feed him and house him, and so she's baking her last loaf of bread. She's got some oil and she's got some wheat, and she tells him, I don't have anything but like I can make one more bit of bread for me and my kid, and after that we're just going to starve. And he tells her, no, your oil and your flour are not going to run out, and but feed me first. So she has to take a step of faith and um, give what's would appear to be her last meal for her and her son, um, and she feeds him with it. But her oil and her flour never run out. But her son passes away due to a sickness, and she kind of blames him for it, or his presence, which is kind of a strange thing. Uh, but what he does is that he prays for God. He prays to God, and he stretches himself out on the boy 3 times, and the boy comes back to life. So it's interesting that, huh?
Jonah's the boy?
So Jonah's the boy according to Midrash. Okay.
But does it have that name Zarephath in the
No, it doesn't have it doesn't have Zarephath in the name. So that's why I put a big question mark. I actually don't think he could have been the son of Zarephath, because I think well, if he was, then he's a very old man by the time he is swallowed by the fish, which is possible. Yeah, there is a timeline there. Somebody timelined it and said, okay, he would have been 80, or he could have been like even older. Um, but the reason I think this is interesting, not just because it's kind of fun, right? But is it kind of connects him already to a death and resurrection story. You know what I mean? That Jonah, when he was a little child, was swallowed up by death, and brought to the abyss, so to speak, and then was brought back. So I don't know if that has anything to do with that story or not, but I thought it was an interesting thing. There's some more midrash stuff I'll bring up later on, just for the fun of it. But I always like to see how some of these I like to wonder, like, how some of these traditions, at least they're traditions, whether historical or not.
Started on based on
Yeah, there's like a little bit of nugget of something that they got started off with, but I couldn't really find anything that was like definitive about it. But I thought it was interesting. So in any case, he is son of Amittai. In the book of Jonah, tells you that straight up. And we find out that there was a Jonah who was the son of Amittai. This is where we know when he lived, right? It says here in 2 Kings 14, it says, in the 15th year of Amaziah, the king of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So this is Jeroboam the second. You had the first Jeroboam who rebelled against Solomon and started the northern kingdom, and he basically became an idol worshiper. And all of the northern kingdom were all idol worshippers from then on. There were no good kings in the north in Israel. Only in the south you had off and on, like, some kings of Judah who were good kings or who had turned things around. But in the north, which is where Elijah, did his ministry, they were all bad kings. So this is the second Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. He began to reign in Samaria. So Samaria, that's where you get like the Samaria, like the Samaritan woman or whatever. It's north of Judah. And he reigned 41 years, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. That's his father, right? The one who rebelled against Solomon, which he made Israel to sin. So he brought the north into he was the one who brought the north into uh, idol worship. He restored the border of Israel. So this second Jeroboam has restored the border of Israel from Lebo Hamath as far as the Sea of Arabah, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai. So here we have our character, right? So it was Jonah who prophesied that he would actually be successful in restoring that border. So it kind of paints Jonah as a yes man in a way. The other thing is that you have an evil king and you have sort of an evil kingdom, but God is being gracious to them anyway. So the dove, son of faithfulness, points more to God's faithfulness. Well, it points all to God's faithfulness and really zero to the state of Israel at the time. So which he spoke by his servant, this Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was from Gath Hepher. For the Lord saw the affliction of Israel was very bitter, for there was none left, bond or free, and there was none to help Israel. But the Lord had not said that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven. So he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So he uses an evil king to save actually an unfaithful people, but he's a gracious God, and he's he's being gracious to them. Now, at the same time, or kind of like a little bit later, you have Amos showing up, and he says, actually, God's justice is going to be poured out on Israel, and they're going to fall to the Assyrians. So Assyria is the kingdom that the north falls to, but they're if you remember, the capital city of Assyria is Nineveh. So Nineveh is the city that that Jonah eventually is sent to. This is the big enemy that is threatening Israel at the time. So so it gives a perspective to like why Jonah's sketched out, let's say, about going to Nineveh, doesn't want to go there.
Jonah went before the Assyrians took them all.
Yeah, yeah.
The Assyrians are taking some.
No, I think the Assyrians were already doing some things. I think early in Jeroboam's reign, he'd been successful against the Assyrians. So there's always like fighting before. So what's happening is that like you have the old Babylonian Empire was like even well before Abraham's day, right? That's the original Hammurabi Babylonian Empire #1. Babylon goes all the way back to Nimrod. That's one of the first stories after the flood. And what you had is you had this Bronze Age collapse happen and everything. And kind of like when it was being, I think, I guess Iron Age, I don't know. You had different people groups kind of trying to revive the Babylonian name and that empire under their own name. So the Assyrians were the first ones to try to, they were before the Neo-Babylonian Empire trying to do that. So they're before the Chaldeans were trying to do that. You had the Assyrians already taking over, and they were kind of like following suit and saying, I think they were trying to do something like, we're trying to revive Babylon, but this time we're Babylon, right? Later on, Assyria, though, they fall to the Neo-Babylonian Empire, who are the Chaldeans. That's when you're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. That's under Daniel's time. And they take over Judah. So first, the northern kingdom falls to Assyria, and then within 150, 200, I forget, like a little while later, then the Neo-Babylonians take over Judah. But you already have Joel. So Amos. If you read the book of Amos, he's warning about how the Assyrians are going to overtake the northern kingdom of Israel. So it kind of so it paints a little bit maybe that Jonah was kind of a yes man and God's favor is with you. And that Amos is like, no, you're going to fall and we're going to fall. I think it's a little bit more like, Jonah's probably stoked that things are being won and that Jeroboam's being successful in restoring the borders, God is being faithful, et cetera, et cetera. And then to hear Amos or somebody like him say, actually, Jeroboam, you're toast and Israel is toast, is kind of like that's kind of an opposite sort of a message, right? So there's a tension there, it seems,
They alive around the same time, right?
Yeah, I think they're contemporary with each other. Yeah. So chapters 1:1-3, it says, now the word of the Lord came to Jonah. And that when you see that phrase, the word of the Lord coming to a prophet, you often have to think, wait a minute, are we talking about the message, or are we talking about exactly the word of the Lord as in Christ? the second figure of the Trinity came to Jonah, because who's doing the talking, right? It's always the word of the Lord, the person doing the talking. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city." That great city, that phrase is only a few times in the Bible. It's really only applied to Nineveh, to Babylon, and ultimately to Mystery Babylon, which I believe to be Jerusalem, or corrupt Jerusalem. So it says, arise, though. Arise. Everything's arise. You're going to see that word a couple times, okay? And call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. So hold on to that thought. The evil has come up before me. But Jonah rose to flee. So God tells him to arise. Jonah does arise, but he arises to take off, right? So arise. So he goes, okay, I'm going to arise and go the other way. And he rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down. So instead of arising, now he's going down. The word called Vayared, to Joppa. So he goes down to Joppa and found the ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went down Vayared into it. So he went down into the boat to go to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. We're thinking, like on our level, right? We know that God is here, right? And we're running, and you know that you can't run from the presence of the Lord. Him being a prophet, this means something a little bit different, okay? Because a prophet was somebody who attended who was in the court of God, who was invited into the divine council. So the way that you became a prophet, or the measure of being a prophet, is that you have stood in the council of God. You've probably seen the angels. You've probably seen the word of the Lord and heard the word of the Lord talking to you. So fleeing from the presence of from God is a little bit more like fleeing from that, rather than just saying, "Oh, I'm going to get out of here," thinking that I can run away from God somewhere. Okay, he just doesn't. It's that presence of God that he's encountered being a prophet.
Is it because to him, like there's principalities and powers over areas?
Yeah,
He's going to a godly land, like Yahweh wasn't going to be there almost.
I've thought about that too, and that's kind of the second layer of it, is that he is going to go. But see, if he goes to same thing, if he went to Nineveh, you're not going to be you're not going to be in the Holy Land anymore, And was the presence of God up in the Northern Kingdom so much? You got the temples in the south, so he's not even really. I don't think Jonah's really even interacted with the temple. When he sees, "I'm going to see your temple again," he's not talking about the temple in Jerusalem, because he's part of the Northern Kingdom. I don't know if he has anything to do with the temple in Jerusalem.
Wouldn't they all kind of have a longing for that, though?
What he's talking about is the temple of God, that he has been in the heavenly temple when he's been in the heavenly council as a prophet. That's what he's running from. He's running from the presence of God. So if you can imagine, being a prophet, you would be taken up in a vision, or, wherever else, into the courtroom of God, into the heavenly council. And, who will go for us? So send me, those kinds of scenarios. And so he's not like, I don't think he's necessarily talking. Now, for them, it's a real connection, so the temple in Jerusalem has a direct connection to the heavenly temple. It's God's footstool. It's God doesn't live in a temple. The universe is his temple, and but Jerusalem, the Holy of Holies, was his footstool. So that great city. So here's that. I mentioned that great city. It says here in Genesis 10, if you go back there to the story of Nimrod, it says Cush fathered Nimrod. He was he was the first one on the earth to be a mighty man, Gibberim. Gibberim is what Samson was. He was a Gibberim, right? Sorry. And they're related to the idea is related to Nephilim. So a lot of scholars will look at Nimrod as sort of one of the early post flood uh, uh, Nephilim or something like that. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Before the Lord means in the face of God. So he's a hunter, sort of like it's kind of like when they built the when they built the Tower of Babel, they say they built it before the Lord. It wasn't like they were doing it in his honor; they were doing it in his face, so to speak. Sort of like here we are. Yeah, go ahead.
I've also heard it said that he was a hunter of God, but not looking for him, but rather having God be like prey.
I think he was more like a hunter of men, and I think there was also a an idea. If you go back to Adam and Eve, they're not even eating meat. They don't even get the permission to kill animals until the after the flood. So there is, I think, so there's a lot of ideas uh, that are kind of going on with the mighty hunter. Um, anyway, Nimrod. Do you guys remember the what was it, Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny? And you had Elmer Fudd, like going, I'm rabbit hunting, and then Bugs Bunny says, Nimrod, right? He's calling him Nimrod because he's a mighty hunter. So,
Nimrod in our culture ended up being like, oh, you're stupid.
well, but it comes from that cartoon.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, it came from that. That's where it started.
Like at the time when they were doing it with Bugs Bunny, it wasn't like you're stupid. It was almost being like sarcastic.
Right.
Oh, the great hunter.
Yeah, he's being sarcastic. Oh, you great hunter.
From that, it expounded to be like, oh,
well, like when we were watching it as kids, most of the jokes went over your head, and so kids would grow up watching it and they just thought it was somebody to call somebody. Hey, shut up, you Nimrod. It's like it comes from being a mighty hunter. It's one of those things. So the beginning of his kingdom, so Nimrod's kingdom was Babel. So he's the one who started Babel, which is Babylon. Okay, Tower of Babel, Babylon. It's the same word. And I don't know why we have two different words in English Bibles. Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. The Shinar plain is where Babylon is. From that land, he went into Assyria and built Nineveh. So Nineveh is another great city besides Babel, which Nimrod had built, right? And it says the Rehoboth, Er, Kala, and Rezin between Nineveh and Kala. That is the great city. So there's already this connection between Nineveh and being called the great city. Later on, at the end of the Bible, we have Mystery Babylon, and it says, "And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." So, and if you look closely, what Mystery Babylon is, Babylon did not exist as a city or as a power by the time John's writing this anymore. And so, but Babylon has become sort of this archetype of, human civilization that's being made in the face of God, without him or against him. And it's man's organization against or without God. But now you find out that it's also that city where Jesus was crucified. So there's a deep connection, at least, to the mystery Babylon to Jerusalem. So, so Jerusalem, in a way, is called Mystery Babylon and that great city. I kind of ripped off a couple slides here because it's going to be easier to do that because Tim Mackey did this thing on Jonah. Tim Mackey's obsessed with Jonah, so he has a bunch of material on there. But their evil is risen up to me, which we find here it says into the as it says, but Jonah went, he says, that great city call out because their evil has come up before me. There's different ways to translate it. Their evil has risen up to me. So that goes all the way to Cain and Abel, like where you have the blood of Abel crying out to God. Then the generation in the flood, the evil generation, the end of all flesh has come up before me. So it's sort of like similar wording. Sodom and Gomorrah, and we looked at this several months back, it says the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is their great sin is and their sin is extremely heavy. I will go down and I will see if its outcry which has come to me. So its outcry has come up before me, basically. They have done it, that they have done totally. This is Mackey's own translation, which is a little bit more literal, but also more awkward. The Israelites in Egypt, it says, and they cried out, and their outcry rose up to God. So when they were being oppressed by Egypt because of their slavery, their cry went out and rose up to God. So in Nineveh, you have sort of the same kind of language. Their evil has risen up before me. So here's Jonah's flight. So over here, you would have Jerusalem, kind of like close to Joppa. Joppa, I think Joppa is the same as Jaffa in modern day Israel, or yeah. But in any case, it's the port, there, and it was a very important port because down here, like in Egypt, it was marshy. Up here, it's more like cliffs and everything. So a lot of people like to land in Joppa. So he's supposed to go up here to Nineveh, go inland into modern day Iraq, right? Nineveh is in Iraq. It's got 550 miles to cover. But instead, he takes a boat going, and he wants to go 2,500 miles all the way to Tarshish. The idea around Tarshish, which is it's probably this place in modern day Spain, and the idea there is that you are going to the edge of the world at the time. After this, you got a bunch of ocean. So a lot of times it's kind of like it looks like the end of the world, and that's where the great dragon lives. That's like the sea. That's the ultimate, So he just wants to go out to the edge of the world, Um, part part of a lot of people kind of feel like he wants to die or something like this. But the Lord hurled a great wind, which is a ruach. Same thing as the spirit word that's in Genesis 1, or that parts the waters, or that blows to dry up the great sea in Noah's day. He hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea. In Septuagint it says cyclone, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God. And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and laid down and was fast asleep. So again, those downwards, right? He went down to Joppa, down into the boat, down into the inner part of the ship. He's just going down, down, down. And then he lay down and he was fast asleep, which you had Vayarad, Yarad, and everything. And now you have Vayaradem. So fast asleep is like you're down for the night. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of word connection where he went down, then he went down, and he went down, and then finally he went down to go to sleep. He fell asleep. So the captain came up to him and says, "What do you mean, you right sleeper?" Actually, in the Septuagint says, "You snorer." Why are you snoring? Arise. So here's the second time you have that same word, arise. God told Jonah to arise at the beginning of the story. Now he's being told to arise again. Call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish. So let's talk about spiritual slumber. I like this painting right here because this is actually Jonah, and I don't know, he's got like a towel around his thing, which makes it look like he's wearing a bra or something like that. And I don't know why he's got Look at his legs. It kind of reminds me of the Where the Wild Things Are or something like that. Yeah, it is a weird image, but in a way, it's kind of like this is actually a Jonah picture. It's kind of like he's already in the water. Uh, he's already kind of down. He's already dead in a way, because what we're talking about is not just a physical sleep, but a spiritual sleep. It's like there's this, and we're going to kind of contrast his sleep with Jesus being asleep on the boat, because you have, okay, he is asleep for one reason, Jesus is asleep kind of for a different reason, or at least they're painted in different lights, right? So, but let's talk about spiritual slumber in the first place. This, like when you're just spiritually, you've kind of put yourself to sleep spiritually, which is pretty much what Jonah has done, right? A spiritual slumber is a form of death. Like when you've kind of run from God, and when you've run from the presence of God instead of towards him, and even if you didn't mean to, and you've just drifted away, it is a form of death. Remember that death in scripture is only a form of exile. So exile is already death. Even self-exile is death. And death is sort of like an ultimate exile, right? If you're talking about physical death. But even physical death is just sort of like there's nobody that ends. Death in the Bible is never the total end of something, right? You would say that spiritual death is a departure of your soul from God, and that physical death is the departure of your soul from your body. That's it. So for him, it's like he's departed from God, and he's in a spiritual slumber. It's a self-exile and a running from God's will. And we don't know, just like Jonah doesn't know, how our spiritual sleep affects others. We're putting ourselves in danger. Yes, Jonah's put himself in danger. But moreover, he's put a bunch of other people in danger. And when you fall into spiritual slumber, I think this is especially true for people who have known God at some point and have drifted away from them, especially if you've got like oversight of other people's souls. Say if you're a father or something like that, or like you're an influential friend, or people look up to you, or whatever it is. You don't know who you're dragging down with you. And even if you wake up from that spiritual slumber and you make your way back to God, is there a guarantee that everybody that you drag down with you is going to do the same thing? So not only do you put yourself in danger, but your spiritual slumber, you can't even see how you're affecting others, what you're doing to other people, what you're doing to the community around you. And sometimes it's not you who wakes up by yourself, it's the people around you who wake you up. And we can expect this from other Christians when they say, "Hey, bro, what are you doing?" But but what really stings sometimes is when non-Christians are like, I used to respect you, or say something where, I remember one time somebody said, "I thought you were close to God," and they were being sincere, right? And it was like a disappointing to this person, even though they were not a godly person. It was, yeah, you were just like, oh wow, man, like it didn't take a Christian for me to uh for me to kind of like wake up and say, hey, I'm in a spiritual slumber here, and realize kind of like the state of mind I'd fallen into. That it took a non-Christian to point that out to me and go, I'm slipping here. So that's kind of like what's happened to Jonah here. It's I think for him to realize what's going on, he's having the pagans kind of saying, why are you asleep? Like what have you done here? You know? So let's compare this story to like Jesus calming the storm. I'm going with Mark 4. It says, on that day when evening had come, he said to them, let us let us go across to the other side. So Jesus is already commanding, this boat they're on a mission, right? This is the opposite thing of what Jonah is doing. Jonah ran away from God. Christ is God, and he's saying, let's go on this mission. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat. He took them with him in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose. The wind here is interesting. It says animu. I'm wondering if that's related to anime, which is another word for soul, Anyway, and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. So, he doesn't have to be thrown overboard. The storm, did it become because of Jesus? This time it looks like opposition rather than something that God is trying to catch, somebody's attention here. And the wind ceased, and he's the one who calms the storms. Where the pagans in Jonah were amazed at, like it's like, wait, it's this guy's God that sent the storm. We just threw him overboard, and now the wind has stopped. This is a powerful God, right? And they know that he has to be at least a God. But Jonah's already told them by that time he's the one who made the seas. He's the one who's made all this. So this is like they're coming towards God because of this. But now you've got the disciples figuring out who Christ is, because just as it was Yahweh who stopped the storm in Jonah's day, now it's Jesus rebuking the storm with his word, and the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear. They were greatly afraid. That's other wording that you're going to see here in Jonah, right? Filled with great fear, and said to one another, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? I'm going to bring up this story as well, and we're kind of going to put both stories in our back pocket. This is Paul's shipwreck. It's in Acts 27. He's on a mission as well. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them. Remember, there's a big storm there, it hits them, and the ship is being threatened. He says, men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Actually, Paul had told them beforehand, we can't set sail now because I'm foreseeing a storm. You shouldn't do this. But they set out anyway, and he's like, now look at us. We're in this middle of the storm. We're gonna incur injury and loss, but we're not going to lose our lives. At least not if you listen to me. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of God, of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. So he almost sounds like Jonah in this case, right? Because he's talking to pagans and saying, I serve this God, and the God who I belong to and the one who I worship has assured us that you're going to survive. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul, for you must stand before Caesar. So here's the deal. Paul is on a mission. He has to stand before Caesar. So for Paul, he knows that this is going to, he can't be drowned in this. He's on a mission, and God's going to spare him. And because God's going to spare him, God's going to also include other people. This has to work, so to speak. And God is going to be merciful on that whole crew because God is merciful to Paul. So Paul is the preserving element here, right? So you must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told, for we must run aground on some island. So he's like, I have to survive, so you guys will survive with me. So let's compare Jesus versus Jonah. So on one hand, you've got running from God, and then on the other hand, you got doing his will. Jonah has a mission that he's running from. Jesus and Paul are going on a mission. So on one hand, you have apathy or just kind of a denial, running away. And on the other hand, you have this assurance and peace. So you could look at that slumber from Jonah being kind of like, I give up and I'm going down and I just want to, like do nothing but sleep it off or sleep through it. And then on the other hand, you've got the portrayal of Jesus who's he's getting some rest on this boat. He's not worried about, whether he's going to survive or not. I mean, what's coming for him is much, much worse than drowning anyway, but he knows he's not going to die at that time, right? So he can sleep. And this is kind of like to compare it, like, remember Peter? Peter had this sleeping problem, right? So Peter's like in the Garden of Gethsemane and he can't stay awake, and Christ is, can't you tarry with me 1 hour, So he's got this thing about going to sleep. But later on, he's going to sleep between two centurions. They're going to execute him the next day, and he's sleeping between the two, right? I wouldn't be sleeping, you know. But I think but think of this. What did Jesus tell Peter? Peter had asked him, Peter had was told by Jesus, when you're an old man, they're going to take you away to where you do not want to go and everything. And Peter must have been between the two centurions going, you know what? I'm not an old man yet. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. But in the meantime, I can get some sleep, between two centurions, even though on the surface it looks like I'm going to be killed the next day. That's not when he ended up dying. No, he ended up dying much later. Again, it was more horrible death. He was crucified along with his wife, upside down. He didn't want to be crucified like his savior. Didn't feel like he was honored enough to do that. It was too much of an honor for him, so he requested to be crucified upside down. But in any case, the ruach of God versus the winds of opposition. So you have the spirit of God, that's causing things to happen, and God does send the storm in Jonah's case. But the winds of opposition, whether or not you could say that God was sent the storm when Jesus is out on the boat or Paul's on the boat or whatever else, it's kind of like, God's in control of it. Either way you look at it, and so whether you're looking at self-inflicted calamity or the calamity inflicted by others or other forces, or if God sent this storm or if Satan sent this, if we look at the storm that killed Job's family, like when they were having that party and everything, that was something that was caused by Satan, but Satan only did it with permission from God in the first place. And so either way, God's got it under his control, either way. So no matter what trouble we end up in, whether it's our own fault or somebody else's fault, the enemy's fault, or God just puts you through it or something like that, it's all things work together for the good of those who are called by his name. So chaos waters in our life, we can break chaos into our own lives. It's our own fault. We can cause chaos in other people's lives, whether or not we mean to, and others can cause chaos in our lives, whether or not they meant to. And external influence, whether spiritual or natural, can cause chaos in our lives. I wrote this a long time ago, and I really don't see much of a difference between spiritual and natural anyway, now anyway. So that's kind of like a thing that the way we talk as, modern Christians. Um, in all cases, God uses things to our own God. Good. So,
I know.
so verses 7 through 10, and they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots." So they're going to roll the dice on this one, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah, and they said to him, "Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us." So they're actually asking him as a prophet. They're not even asking him, it's like, "Tell us why you brought this on us." They're saying why the lots fell on Jonah as the one who could tell them what's up and whose fault this is. Okay, tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. They may not even be expecting for him to say it's me, right? They yeah, I didn't either, So what is your occupation? Hey, I'm a prophet of God. Yeah. Where do you come from? I come from Israel, the land of Yahweh, what is your country, and of what people are you? This is kind of all like, what are you doing on the ship? Well, where are you going? What's up? And also, like, what God do you serve? And they're kind of catching on, lots fell on him. You're kind of important according to these lots, or however that's supposed to work. And he says, and he said to them, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord of God in heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." I like his response, the sea and the dry land, because this is all about the chaos waters and the dry land. He's going to be cast into the sea, and he's going to be spit up on the dry land. This word, word here, dry land, Yahweh, God created the heavens, and that goes all the way to the first pages of Genesis. Then the men were exceedingly afraid. So you have this great fear from them. Remember seeing that in the Jesus story? They were greatly afraid. The men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done? What'd you do?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them, what are you doing on the ship? Yeah, I'm trying to get away from the presence of Yahweh, and I'm this prophet. He used to be in his presence, and all that. So
He admits that he fears the Lord.
yeah,
It's like, doesn't he know God can get him for what he's doing? But like, did he really think?
yeah, it's kind of ironic. Says, if you really feared God, would you be doing this? Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like he made everything that, like, you're seeing, and who knows? Maybe it's kind of like, now that he's woken up and he sees the storm, and they're cast lots, and it comes on him, and he sees all the trouble that he's gotten everybody into, and how he's gotten himself into this trouble. He says, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord," the God of heaven, and he's gone, who made the seas. Like, God, I know you made the seas and the dry land, by the way, like, get me there. Then the men were exceedingly afraid. They're like, like, okay, what is this that you've done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he told them. So there's this idea of catching a culprit through lot casting. It's not the only time in the Bible that you see lot casting. Of course, we saw that in Ruth, and but it's a common thing to kind of, the word is almost catching, right? This is Tim Mackey's slides on this. There's a little part of his head right there, Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I'll recognize that.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm going. If you're wondering what this is because I screenshotted it from a video. That's how cheap I am. But
Thank you for doing it.
it's and he saved me a little bit of time here. So you've got the selection of the goat of sin on the Day of Atonement. So, like, on the Day of Atonement, you cast lots and you get it. That's in Leviticus. You also have the discovery of Achan, that's what we're going to concentrate on. So I'll get back to that. The selection of Saul, that's 1 Samuel, and then Jonathan's near execution by Saul, and then the discovery of Jonah. If you go back to Joshua and the destruction of Jericho, God says basically, you're not going to take the silver and the gold. Don't keep that for yourself. You've got a bunch of things destined for destruction, but the silver and gold you have to keep. You can't keep that for yourself. So it says here in Joshua 6:20 through 24. Oh, but you are going to save Rahab the prostitute. So what this is going to build up between these two chapters is that you're going to have someone in Jericho who's an outsider but now belongs to us, right? But now you're going to find Achan who sinned against the Lord, and it's somebody among us who doesn't belong here anymore. Okay. It's kind of like it's this role, Rahab belongs with us, Achan needs to be cast out. Okay. So Joshua 6:24, this is 20 through 24, it says, the people charged each one straight ahead into the city, and they captured it. So, this is going into Jericho. They captured it. It's then Joshua said to the two men who spied on the land, go to the prostitute's house and bring out from there the woman and all who belong to her. So the woman and all who belong to her, just as you swore to her. So the young men who were spies and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, and her brothers, and all who were with her, and they burned the city with fire. The silver and the gold, the items of copper, they burned the city with fire and all that was in it with fire. They put only the silver and gold and the items of copper or iron into the treasury of the house of Yahweh. So the metal, the metal and precious metal stuff is supposed to go to the Lord's treasury, right? Now, here in the next chapter, what's happened is this guy named Achan, or Achan, he has taken some of that treasure and he's hidden it, right? And he's kept it. So so Joshua goes, what's happened in between here is that they've lost the next battle, and he knows, okay, wait a minute, calamity's come upon us, and what happened and whose fault is this? Okay, so it's like, okay, why is God angry at us? And so you have a victory at Jericho, then they lose the next battle, they find this Achan guy and put him to death, and then they win their next battle. So you have this nice kind of trilogy of battles there. So, but anyway, in between there, they said, there are devoted things in your midst. In other words, they know that somebody's hiding some of the treasure. O Israel, you will be unable to stand before your enemies until you remove the devoted things from your midst. In the morning you will come forward tribe by tribe, and the tribe that Yahweh captures will come forward by the clans. So it will not have captures in most of our translations, okay? But it's the same word as the captured here in Hebrew. So that's why he's translated that way. The tribe that Yahweh captures will come forward by the clans, and the clan that Yahweh captures will come forward by the families, and the family that Yahweh captures will come forward one by one. This capturing is done by lots. They're going to cast lots, and and they're going to narrow it down till they find the right tribe and the right family and everything. And it says the one captured with the devoted things will be burned with fire. In other words, they burned the city with fire. Okay. And now they're going to take whoever. So they captured Jericho. They burned the city with fire. Now, whoever they capture with these lots will be burned with fire because he belongs to the fire, just like Jericho does. Rahab belongs to us, but this Achan guy is going to belong to the fire. He and all that belongs to him. So the woman and all who belong to her are now in our camp. he will be burned with fire, he and all that belong to him. So you have that parallel language, right? Because he transgressed the covenant of Yahweh, and because you did a disgraceful thing in Israel. Now we're going to do some comparison between this Joshua story and this Jonah story. Okay, because of Achan's treachery, Yahweh's anger burned against Israel in the Joshua story, and they were defeated by the soldiers of Ai. This causes the Israelites' hearts to, quote, melt and become like waters. So Jonah here, it says, because of Jonah's treachery, Yahweh hurls a great wind at the sea waters so that the waters rage. It's sort of a similar idea here where like you have burning, the way that you have anger described in Hebrew is a burning, right? Now you have the waters that are burning and threaten everybody on the ship. And of course, you have the idea of them having a great fear. And of course, the Israelites' hearts become melt. They melt with fear and they become like waters, like the Jonah story waters.
Could that mean that with the waters raging, there to, that his anger, his rage burns, that it was like a boiling sea?
Yeah, then that's the idea. Like we know what a raging ocean
Yeah.
looks like, right? And so, yeah, it's visual. It's visual language. It's even more pronounced when you, well, I've heard when you read it in Hebrew, right? And this is kind of like one of those things that if you hand somebody who's grown up reading Hebrew in the Hebrew Old Testament, they read it in English for the first time, they're like, what is this? What is this? It's like there's actually a lot more that like Evan's brain started going when he started reading Hebrew. He's like, oh my gosh, everything rhymes and there's all these connections.
I always wondered, like, when we read Psalms in Hebrew, does it rhyme actually?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't even rhyme. Yeah, Psalms don't even rhyme in Hebrew. You have thought patterns though that like that that actually translate well into other language compared to you know but you have words that rhyme like in stories, and I'm sure you have some things that rhyme, but they're not like where we would rhyme them, and they don't rhyme for the same reason.
As I get older and hear more language, I realize like language is so more complicated. Like when I was a kid, I just thought there was like a direct word for every word in every language.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah.
it's not like that at all. And like this last trip to the Philippines, I was realizing some of the words, they're kind of translating this like this to us, but I don't think it really has the exact same meaning,
No.
like complicated.
Well, this is weird. Like in the beginning, like Adam, Adam was made from the Adamah, which means earth, and when Cain kills Abel, um, oh, what is the dam? I think is the word for blood. So his like you have an Adamah, a human. His dam is calling out from the Adamah. So you have like these word plays between earth and man and blood.
So we miss
Yeah.
out on a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we do kind of get So Achan takes the plunder and hides it. Okay. While Jonah hides himself, the sailors are hurling their cargo overboard. And remember, he's hiding among the cargo. But look at this word for cargo and then compare it to the belongings here. Yeah, it's the same word, right? So Achan, who's hiding the plunder that he's stolen from Jericho among the belongings, now you have Jonah, who is hiding himself among the belongings or cargo. So you have sort of like he's actually kind of like in the place of the treasure here. There's another story that's a little bit like this one. There is a lot casting ceremony to divide the troubler of Israel, and the lot falls on Achan, son of Carmi. I don't know how to pronounce it. And then, of course, there's a lot casting ceremony, so we can know on whose account this evil is to us. and the lot falls on Jonah, son of Amittai. So he is captured. In Joshua 7, it says Joshua's confrontation with Achan. It says, please tell, what is this that you have done? Joshua asks Achan that. What'd you do? And of course, Achan says, according to this, I have done. So he fesses up. So the sailors and Jonah, they go, please tell us, what is this that you have done? And then, of course, he's told them that he's been running from Yahweh. So in the Joshua story, it says Achan took from the plunder devoted to Yahweh, and so I'll call him Achan. Achan is treated like the city devoted to Yahweh as a result. So Achan is treated like the city devoted to Yahweh as a result. Yeah. So what this means is that, of course, Achan is treated like Jericho is treated. He's burned with fire, just like Jericho's treated.
It almost sounds like a good thing, like, oh, the city devoted to God, or the.
Yeah, so and then Jonah fled from Yahweh in a ship, causing others to be endangered by the water. So Jonah is cast into the waters as a result. So he's cast into Jericho, the fires, and Jonah is cast into the judgment, which is the storm, the seas. Joshua 6, 17 through 19 says, the city and all that is in it will be devoted to Yahweh. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and all who are with her in the house will live, because she hid the messengers whom he sent. As for you, keep away the things. I think this slide is out of place. Anyway, I should have had this one up front. Anyway, so finally, verses 11 through 16, they said to him, what shall we do to you so that the sea may be quiet down for us? Yeah. And for the sea grew more and more tempestuous. He said to them, pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore, they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us the innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it is pleased you. This is gonna come into contrast with the Jews when they say about Christ, let his blood be on us and our families, on our heads and yeah.
I'm surprised how respectful they are of Yahweh in this situation, the God they didn't know,
Right.
and how they actually tried to get back to land.
And yeah,
They didn't throw them over right away. They're like, oh, well, we're gonna try to get back to it.
Here's kind of like a remarkable thing. If most pagan gods, like say we all serve these different pagan gods, and it's like, oh, it's because of your God that this is happening, and you're gonna throw us overboard. Okay, here you go. Here you go, sacrifice. Here's your sacrifice, God. Yeah, exactly. So like, what gives them the instinct that like, no, this God cares about innocent blood? You know what I mean? So that's kind of a and why they say in blood, there's no, in a literal sense, there's no blood involved, but it brings you back to that idea of Abel being killed by Cain, right? The blood cries out. There's this idea of the outcry of the Ninevites, and against the Ninevites, and this is going back to the Cain's. This goes all the way back to the Cain story about innocent blood being shed, and then and looking forward to. I mean, Christ tells them, so that on you may come all the blood from Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who you killed between the altar and the court or whatever. So but then when he's about to be crucified, like the Jews are crying out, let his blood be on our heads. So they said, for you, O Lord, have done as it has pleased you. So in other words, it seems that, please don't put any of this blame on us. You're the one who seems to be after this guy. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. You know?
I wonder how quick it was, like.
It sounded like it was like,
Oh,
boom.
Now you're fine. You think the star slowly fizzled out? I wonder if it was just like, wow, sun shining, like,
Right, you know, like I wonder how it was like when Jesus said, "Peace be still," you know.
Well, I kind of think it was more like immediately, because then the men feared the Lord.
Yeah, that it was. Let's just say it was quick enough for them to realize that storm didn't just blow over, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like a natural thing. It was-
Yeah, they're like, okay, this is something else that freaks them out. The men feared the Lord exceedingly. Oh, by the way, this where we see great and exceedingly is often the same word in Jonah. It's the great fish, you know, the great anger that Jonah's gonna have, the great it's like everything's great and big and epic and huge. Well, it's not only that, but it's very the story of Jonah. Jonah is like it's kind of a comedy, you know, like where it's where everything's like over the top and huge and you know
Not very
epic.
Jewish because they didn't ask the question afterwards.
What?
It's not like Jewish because they didn't ask the question afterwards.
I don't get that.
Well, because it's like, don't they always like ask the question before they answer?
Oh, kind okay. Okay, I kind of get you there.
I wonder what,
See, like that.
I wonder what group of people they say it was, like what ethnicity or what.
Yeah, they're probably from a variety of
I don't
different
think it really
places.
matters.
Yeah, because they're all like Japa's is like big port, and they're gonna go all the way. If they're going all the way to Tarshish, who knows? You know, like yeah. So then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. So they're making sacrifices to Yahweh, and they're making vows, which is interesting. So here's some closing thoughts. The pagans attempted to save Jonah's life, right? It's the guys who are supposed to be the bad guys. They're trying to save Jonah's life. But on the contrary, Jonah will wish for the death and destruction of the pagans that he's sent to, you know? So Israel's entire mission is that has always been to bring about the salvation of the world. In other words, God preserved Israel in order to save the world. It's right, but see, this is kind of like this is the way a lot of our Christian thinking is sometimes, right? Because we're like, God saved me out of this place, or you know, this world's going to hell in a handbasket, but God's going to grab me up before that happens, or something like that, you know, where it's like, no, you're actually here to preserve it and be the salt of the earth and to save people from going to hell in a handbasket, right? Yeah, yeah. It's like, you know, and we always think, and we have this habit of thinking because we think, oh, that was Israel. No, you're Israel. You're God's chosen people. You're grafted into Israel. You have to wrestle with God. That's your name. And you have to, and you're the ones who have been chosen, just like Jonah, to go into the mouth of the monster Nineveh and proclaim that you know like God's going to destroy you. You turn or burn. You know, sort of. And that is so, but it is what we are chosen for.
They sure don't seem to feel like that's part of their chosen calling at all these days.
Yeah, yeah, and see, that is Jonah is a criticism that was already going on back in Jonah's days, right? That was already going on when Jonah was written, and and so the reason that big part of the reason that we have the story of Jonah is an indictment on Israel of the way they had become. It's like we're the chosen people. We just want to be rescued from this.
Because even
But,
before
you know.
Jesus, anyone that was in their borders that followed the commandments of the Lord was saved. Like you know, the foreigner among you, they really could have been proselytizing and trying to get other nations to follow Yahweh. They could have been acting as missionaries already, right? Really, right?
Yeah,
But they didn't.
it was almost as if God made them reluctant missionaries with exile, honestly. So it's kind of like you remember like I got into this whole idea of like the earth being affected by sin. Sin is seen being seen as this infection.
Uh-huh.
And then what God does is he takes one people and gives them a culture and a set of laws and something and a and
And
yeah, to be preserved in the middle of a great infection and to maintain a degree of holiness. And the closer you were to the center of the camp or the center of Jerusalem where the Holy of Holies is, the more holy you had to be. In other words, if you're a priest and the high priest, you had to be extremely holy to walk into the Holy of Holies. And I mean, it's very restricted. So it's kind of like concentric circles. But then outside of the camp is still where you have the wild animals, you have the wilderness. It's almost like the ocean, the tohu wabohu, all of that's going on. But there's kind of a promise that the whole world is going to be redeemed, and I'm going to use you to do it. Right? So it wasn't as if they were like sent out into the world yet. Christ wasn't going to do that until, the new covenant. And he takes his disciples and says, okay, I want you to go spread this out. So it wasn't that they had this direct command to, but the question, but there was always that thing on the horizon. Why is God preserving us? Just because he wants to save a few of us and that's it? Or is he saving us because, and we're a chosen people because we have this task that he's going to bring to fulfillment eventually. So there's always that on the horizon. It's out there. So when Christ comes, not only do you have like that infection on the inside of the camp becomes like the good infection that is now spreading across the world. So it used to be that like you could only, if you touch somebody from the outside or outside of the camp, is like where you would keep the lepers, if you had a dead body, all those kinds of things. But now Christ was turning things around where he was touching lepers, and instead of him becoming unclean, they were becoming clean. He's touching dead bodies and they're coming back to life, that sort of thing. So that's why, and it goes all the way to like where Peter has his vision with the Gentiles are being saved. It's like what God has made clean, don't call unclean, because now that outer wilderness, all those wilderness animals, all those unclean things, they're being redeemed and they're coming in because the world is being cleaned because of what Christ did. I don't know how I got there anyway. So
yeah.
so Israel's entire, yeah, okay. So we, like Jonah, are being sent into the belly of the beast. Our task is within Babylon. And it's easy to fall into this desire to simply be rescued from it and to watch it burn. A lot of people kind of come to that place. Well, God's just going to get us out of here anyway, you know. Thank God for his promises and his salvation, but in the meantime, you have a task. So like Jonah and like Christ, we have died and been resurrected. We've been resurrected. But what have we been resurrected for? For what? What have we been saved for? We've been saved for good works. We've been saved in order to be we are a chosen people in order to bring God's glory into the world. So Jonah is not just an indictment for Israel in, like the 7th or 8th century BC. It's an indictment for the church now, because we are Israel. And it's an indictment to the way we think about our enemy. Because what if our enemy actually repents? What if our enemy actually does come to the Lord? And do we hope for that?
I've gotten that argument a lot with a lot of Christians. Like I've always like, man, Jesus is so awesome, God's forgiveness. What if that would have been awesome if Hitler would have repented? And I've had a lot of Christians say, no, it wouldn't. Like I'm like, and I always find that weird. I'm like, would have that been a cool story if Hitler repented? I've heard a lot of Christians like, no, it wouldn't. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I always find that bizarre. I'm like, forever.
Well, here's the thing: is like you have Hitler Assyria, Assyria used to like skin people alive and they'd put hooks in their jaws and drag them up, they'd drag them 500 miles across the desert, you know, and they'd cut out, they would gouge their eyes out and they do all this, they would totally maim them and, you know, and
Syria, they had the metal bowl. They put people in and heat it up, so.
no, that was, that was,
Greek,
yeah, that was, in Pergamus. That was in Christ's day. And in John's day. What they had, okay, interestingly, one of their gods was this fish god,
right?
Dagon. In Hebrew, the fish that swallows Jonah is a dog. Yeah, it's that's another. So it connects. The dog is connected to the idea of like this town where they worship Dagon. Dagon.
Do we know if there's any, I always wonder about the certain stories in the Bible where it gets you to a place. And then you never hear about it again, like, if all the Nineveh repented, is there any other reference in the Bible of that area being an area of Yahweh worshipers later on, or like, you know, I always want to know too, and I haven't done any research on it, but when the veil tore in the temple, does any Jewish history have anything written about the veil tearing? You know, I always wonder.
I don't know about that. Okay, for a long time, archaeologists were like, they kind of dissed on Bible believers because they're like, there's no evidence that this place existed.
More stuff.
Yeah, it's just like until you discover it, right? Until somebody saw like these stones in the middle of the desert, you know, and they started like digging there, and then they were like, oh, here's a place, and it's the dimensions that's described in Jonah, and in the middle of it they find a statue, and I got to look this up, okay? Because I don't have much a memory about this, but apparently there's a statue of like somebody who came out of a fish.
In the middle of the desert.
Yeah, like they came out of a fish, like, and like it's like some kind of hero. So they're like, is that Jonah?
Like a Jonah legend.
Yeah, there's like that. So like, did they have some kind of a Jonah legend? Or this or something like that. So like I said, I'm gonna have to dig that up because I just thought about it. So I don't know. I don't see really much evidence like in if they had a repentance, you know, their repentance was short-lived.
That's kind of what I got too.
To say the least, right?
Because then they ended up going back and they ended up enslaving Israel eventually.
Yeah, they ended up like, you know, being horrible to Israel in the end anyway.
I always wonder too, did God send out like missionaries other times? It's just not recorded in the Bible, and then if Israel knew that they had this true and powerful God, why in their hearts weren't they wanting to help everyone learn about it?
Well, see, that wasn't their mission, and I don't. It wasn't their direct mission to go out and.
Well, I know God never told them, but it's like if you had a.
What were the Sadducees and Pharisees doing earlier? They were more worried about power and control of the people.
Yeah, I mean, up until today, you don't have like Jews proselytizing, and you never really had Jews proselytizing.
They don't even want to be your friend, practically.
Yeah, they don't really want nothing to do with you, like the Amish.
Yeah. No, I mean, I met some friendly Jewish guys.